In 1966, in China, you could be killed for owning a piano. Not for what you played on it, not for what you said about it, simply for having one. Because a piano was Western, and Western meant bourgeois, and bourgeois meant enemy. And enemies in Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution did not fare well. To understand what happened to music in China between 1966 and 1976, you have to understand what the Cultural Revolution actually was. In 1966, Mao Zedong launched what he called the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. Its stated purpose was to purge China of everything considered traditional, Western, bourgeois, or intellectually elite, and to create a pure socialist society built on revolutionary values alone. In reality, it was a political power struggle dressed as an ideological crusade. Mao mobilized millions of young students as Red Guards, telling them to destroy the four olds: old customs, old culture, old habits, old ideas. They did. Books were burned. Temples were destroyed. Universities were closed. Teachers were beaten by their own students. Intellectuals were paraded through streets wearing dunce caps with accusations written on them. Doctors, lawyers, artists, writers, anyone associated with education, culture, or Western influence became a target. And music, particularly Western classical music, was viewed with special hostility. Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, launched a vicious campaign to cleanse the arts. All plays, films, operas, ballets, and music considered feudalistic or bourgeois were banned. Red Guards went house to house searching for pianos, searching for busts of Beethoven, searching for any evidence that the person inside that house had a connection to Western culture. Instruments were smashed in the streets, concert halls were shuttered, conservatories were turned into re-education centers, musicians were sent to labor camps in the countryside to learn from the workers and forget everything they had ever known. In this world, 3 musicians made choices that this channel was built to remember. Luting was 63 years old when the Cultural Revolution began. He was the director of the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, one of the most respected musical institutions in China. A composer who had devoted his life to both Chinese and Western music. When the regime began attacking Western composers as enemies of the state, Luting did something almost incomprehensible. He fought back. He publicly defended the music of Claude Debussy, the French composer whose work the regime had labeled the dirt left behind by Western imperialism. His defense was deemed the most serious counter-revolutionary incident prior to the Cultural Revolution. He was hauled before a struggle session, a public humiliation rally broadcast live on Chinese television, where thousands screamed accusations at him and demanded he confess his crimes. Luting looked at the cameras, he looked at the crowd, and he shouted back, "Your accusations are false. Shame on you for lying." On live television, in front of the entire country. Music critic Alex Ross later wrote that no composer had ever made a braver stand against totalitarianism. Luting was beaten. He was subjected to years of physical abuse and interrogation. He refused to confess. He survived. Liu Shikun was 27 years old when the Cultural Revolution began. one of the most gifted pianists China had ever produced, winner of the Liszt International Piano Competition in 1956, winner of second prize at the first Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow in 1958, at just 19 years old. When Western music was banned, Liu Shikun was labeled a counter-revolutionary black gangster. He was sent to a factory to work as an odd job man. Then he was arrested. In prison, his hands were broken with a hammer. The hands that had played Liszt and Tchaikovsky to standing ovations across Europe and China. Broken. He spent years in prison with no access to a piano, so he practiced in his mind. Every piece he knew, every phrase, every fingering, rehearsed in silence inside a prison cell. When he was finally released in 1973, he performed the Liszt First Concerto with the Philadelphia Orchestra on their historic visit to China. With hands that had been broken by a hammer. Hongen was the conductor and deputy head of the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra. When the Cultural Revolution began, he made no attempt to hide what he thought of it. He called it tyrannical, catastrophic, and disastrous, a war upon culture and intellectuals. He was arrested. In his cell, he coped with the beatings and the abuse by humming Beethoven's Third Symphony, the Missa Solemnis, over and over in the dark. On the 27th of April, 1968, Liu Hongen was brought before a mass sentencing struggle session at the Shanghai Culture Square. He was found guilty of being a counter-revolutionary. He was sentenced to death. Before his execution, he made one request of his cellmate. If you ever get out of here alive, would you please do two things? Find my son and go to Vienna. Go to Beethoven's grave and tell him that his Chinese disciple was humming the Missa Solemnis as he went to his execution. Many years later, his cellmate kept that promise. He laid flowers on Beethoven's grave in Vienna on behalf of a conductor in Shanghai who had died for loving music. The Cultural Revolution ended in 1976 with Mao's death. Just months later, Beijing's Central Philharmonic Orchestra applied for permission to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Beethoven's death. The request was considered so sensitive, it was sent to the Standing Committee of the Communist Party Politburo. Permission was eventually granted. On the 26th of March 1977, the orchestra played Beethoven's Fifth. The last two movements were broadcast nationwide. For millions of Chinese people who heard it, it was the signal that the Cultural Revolution was truly over, that music had come back, that it had survived. Think about what these three men understood that their persecutors did not. A regime can ban a piece of music. It can smash the instrument it was played on. It can imprison the hands that played it. It can silence the voice that defended it. It can even execute the conductor who hummed it in his cell. But it cannot reach inside a human being and remove the melody that lives there. Luting knew this when he shouted back at the cameras. Liu Shikun knew this when he practiced piano with his mind in a prison cell. Hongen knew this when he hummed Beethoven on the way to his death. Music is not a thing that can be confiscated. It is not an object that can be smashed. It is not a building that can be closed. It lives where they cannot reach it, inside. 不能沉寂的歌. In Mandarin, the song that could not be silent. This is the song behind the story, where music isn't the background, it's the point.